My name is Jennifer Maddox, and I'm the coordinator of the Kentucky Great Writers series. And this series features authors who either live or have lived in Kentucky, or perhaps they even worked in Kentucky, and they have one or more literary works of high quality. Before we begin our readings, so I'm going to introduce you to a few things about the Carnegie Center that are coming up and let you know what you can expect for tonight. So through at least the end of October, the Carnegie Center's programs will be online. That includes our writing workshops, our writer mentoring, our Kentucky Black Writers Collaborative, and much more. Coming up on October 12th, the Carnegie Center will host Writing and Publishing While Black, and that's going to be a panel featuring Kentucky Poet Laureate Crystal Wilkinson, Shayla Lawson, who's been on Kentucky Great Writers in the past, and also Angela Jackson Browne, who you're going to get to hear read tonight. And to register for the panel that I just mentioned, you need to go to the Carnegie Center's website to our events section, so carnegiecenterlex.org. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Wrightsville Cook Foundation, Kentucky Arts Council, LexArts, and WKY. And we'd also like to give a special thanks to Nate's Coffee, who's been providing their delicious brew for years at our readings. Hopefully we'll be able to do that again in the spring. Now, after all of our authors have read tonight, we're going to do a Q&A, and you have an opportunity as our audience to ask your questions. The way to do that is the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen. The authors won't be checking that during the event, but we will look at it later, and I'll ask some of those questions. Now, please support tonight's authors by buying their books. And in our chat, we have a link where you can buy those at our bookshop page, which is www.bookshop.org/shop/Carnegie Center. And at no additional cost to you, if you buy books there at that site, a portion of bookshop sales will go to the Carnegie Center and a portion will go to independent bookstores. So everybody wins. Now, this event is being recorded and will be available on Carnegie Center's Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And then later, we're going to rebroadcast it on the radio on 91.3 WKY Lexington. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our readings. Now, if you're just tuning in, I'm Jennifer Maddox. I'm the coordinator of the Kentucky Great Writers series. Tonight's authors, I can tell you this, they are all three masters of characters and stories with a unique voice. And their books are going to pull you in from the first page until the last. As I was preparing the bios for tonight's readings, one of the things that I was struck by was the fact that, all three have a plethora of amazing blurbs about their books that really perfectly describe them. And so instead of me trying to redescribe them, I'm going to be sharing some of those blurbs with you tonight because they're pretty outstanding. They make you definitely want to go buy the book even before you've heard them read. So our first author tonight is Angela Jackson Browne. So Angela, welcome to the Kentucky Great Writers series.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Now, one of the things about Zoom that makes it really neat is that we can be in different states, we can be in different cities, and we're here together for Kentucky Great Writers. So today, I'm in Bourbon County, which is north of Fayette County, where the Carnegie Center is located. Where are you located today?
I was telling someone I'm in the suburbs of Muncie, Indiana. And if you know how small Muncie is, you know there's no suburbs, but just outside of Muncie.
Well, we're so glad that you could join us, and Zoom definitely made it much easier for you to participate. So we're happy to help in that way, at least. So I want to tell our audience, though, just a little bit about Angela. And if you hear my cat scratching, I apologize. She wants to be on this Zoom call so bad. But Angela Jackson Browne is an award-winning writer of novels, poetries, and plays. And in addition to teaching at Ball State, which is in Muncie, Indiana, she's just joined the faculty of one of her alma maters, Spalding School of Writing, where she's going to be mentoring students in fiction, which is really exciting. Library Journal's starred review of her latest novel, When Stars Rain Down, calls it a powerful own voices contribution to the historical fiction genre. And this novel has been listed as a must-read by many sources, including Parade, BuzzFeed, Goodreads, and others, and Silas House agrees with them. He says, "It is so powerful, timely, and compelling that sometimes I found myself holding my breath while reading it. Rarely have I been so attached to characters and felt so transported to a time and place. This is an important and beautifully written must-read of a novel. Now, evidence of Angela's playwriting experience definitely shines through, as noted by Alabama Public Radio, which they said that her novel, her novel deals with a series of issues: racism, teenage love, the death of our elders, and more. And she presents these in a series of carefully crafted scenes, almost one-act plays. Once in a while, one reads a novel and can already see the film to be made from it. And now I give you Angela Jackson Browne.
Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you to the Carnegie Center. I want to throw this out there because I don't know if you all know this, but I found my literary agent through the Carnegie Center. You had an agent pitch event, and I was able to connect with Alice Spielberg through you. So I always have a warm space in my heart for what you do for writers from Kentucky and surrounding areas. So I have been reading from my novel, When Stars Rain Down, for the last, almost last year. So I'm thinking I'm going to give everybody a break from that particular book. And tonight I'm going to read from a short story that will be published soon in an anthology called The Fire Inside. If you go to Amazon, and I'm imagining other book selling websites, you can pre-order that anthology real soon, and it's called The Fire Inside. The story I'm reading from is called Sitting with the Dead. My grandnana used to talk in what some folks might call riddles, but I never saw it that way because even as a child, I wanted to be like her when I grew up. So I was willing to ponder her words. She'd say, everything we ever need to cure ourselves is growing right here on God's great earth. It wasn't until I started paying attention that I truly learned what she meant. For example, my mama used to be late with her monthlies. She'd go crying to Grandnana all doubled over, and Grandnana would boil 5 large heads of hemp that she grew back in the deep wooded parts of our land. Once it boiled, she'd strain it and pour it into a big coffee cup. Drink this, Lalita, and your time will start quicker than a finger snap, she'd say, snapping her gnarled fingers so loud I just knew her fingers would break into pieces. Within minutes, Mama would be better, and later when I would go out to empty the trash, I would find bloody rags that proved what Grandnana had said. Even though Grandnana was my daddy's mama, she and my mama were closer than any 2 people I ever did see, which is why I love Grandnana so much myself, and why every word Grandnana spoke was as real and true to me as the red-lettered words in the King James Bible. She also told me about houses. She and I were lying in her bed one night when the conversation started. I had to be about 7 or 8. I remember she always smelled like liniment and turpentine because she swore those worked better than anything a doctor could prescribe for the rheumatism. It was raining and I was scared because the house kept making creaking noises. It also didn't help that Grandnana had turned off and unplugged every item in the house, like the television and radio that would have kept my mind off the haunting sounds of the storm. When a storm came, Grandnana preached 2 things: unplug everything that could spark up and cause a fire, and get somewhere and be still because God was having his say. Don't worry none about the sounds the house is making. It's just trying to tell us it's a tad bit scared itself. Rosie Lynn, houses know a lot, but rooms know more, my then 90-year-old Grandnana said. I asked her why, and she said, because even though rooms is pretty quiet most of the time, they are always there, listening and soaking up what people who pass through them are thinking and feeling. I thought about her words as I sat there in my papa's room now, waiting for him to die. I could feel the pure misery of Papa's room. It was almost buckling down from the weight of all the emotions it carried. The room was so troubled, almost to the point where I could hear it groaning. It was so burdened down by the heaviness of it all, moaning like a sinner at tarrying service. Gonna be all right, I whispered as I fidgeted in my seat. I can't say if I was talking to the room or myself. Probably both of us. I had sat so long, my body felt like it had aged by 10 or 20 years. I looked out the window in the room and saw it was starting to rain. The trees were bending a little and the sky had gotten dark. Alabama thunderstorms could come out of nowhere, fly in like a swarm of hornets or bees, and then whisk away like nothing had happened. Gonna be all right, I whispered again, this time a little louder. Then I sighed real loud. Here I was, only 31 years old, and I was plumb worn out. So tired I could have grabbed hold to that death angel when he swooped in for Daddy. Could have rode it all the way to glory. What you say, Mama? My daughter Honey asked, sitting up a little straighter in the recliner she plopped into an hour ago. Her real name is Desiree, but I quickly nicknamed her Honey. Soon as I saw she was going to be fat, didn't want her saddled with some nickname about her size and her weight and her shape. A couple of the kids tried to call her Honey Bun, but it never really caught. I was thankful. She didn't need nothing else holding her down in this world. Me, Honey, and my daddy lived just across the tracks in Slap Out, Alabama. They said it's called Slap Out because it's slap out in the middle of nowhere. Slap out in the middle of hopelessness, at least for folks like Honey and me. Everybody in Slap Out was slap out of luck and slap out of choices. You'd think we'd just up and leave, but where would we go? As Grandnana used to say, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. I looked over at Honey. She had plaited down her hair into 2 long braids hanging down each shoulder. She looked like a plump Pocahontas. She and I had been sitting together for hours, listening to Papa breathe in and breathe out like a tea kettle's whistle. I had turned his TV to Days of Our Lives just so I could drown out the sound he was making, but it seemed to be getting louder and louder. Seemed like the louder Bo and Hope argued on the television, the more rough his breathing got. Honey and I had been sitting there with him since early that morning after we brought him home from the hospital in the ambulance. The doctors had called us in and told us they'd done all they could do. Before that, the doctor could get them words out of his mouth good, I started packing up Daddy's belongings. Miss Whitson, you don't have to take your dad anywhere. We'll take good. I shook my head and motioned to Honey to get up. Honey, go get your grandpappy's toilet stuff out of the bathroom. She didn't move. I sighed. I should have known Honey wasn't going to lift a finger to help, not when it came to her grandpappy. He'd never done any harm to her, but she hated him for the harm he'd done to me. One time when she was about 9 or 10, she said I was like Celie from the Color Purple movie. What? You think I'm black and ugly? I asked, smiling a bit. But Honey didn't smile. No, she said, you're scared, just like Celie. A part of me was scared, and when that doctor told me Papa was surely gonna die this time, I was scared he'd die, but a larger part of me was scared the old cuss would live. I was tired and ready for some rest. Papa dying would give me rest, or at least I hoped it would. I prayed it would. I looked at that handsome white doctor looking like a young Clint Eastwood, and I shook my head. Our people dies at home. Y'all just fix them papers so I can check him out. And I was telling him the truth. My grandnana had died at home. She'd gone on a sunny day, picture perfect, folks might say, and her dying wasn't labored. She had smiled at me one last time, and then her spirit floated away like steam from its tea kettle. My mama and my Aunt Doll, Grandnana's daughter, had left this world peaceful too. I guess it is true. How you live is how you die. I knew if that statement were true, Papa's passing was going to be rough, like a hurricane coming inland from the Gulf of Mexico. The doctor tried to insist we stay, talked about something that started with the letter H. I think he said it was a place that took care of people till they died. I can't say I remember all that he said, because by that time I had tuned him out. I bent down to Papa's ear. You going home now, you old cuss. You gonna get your wish. Papa had told us he didn't want to die in a nursing home or at a hospital. And like always, he was going to get what he wanted. Once we got home, the first few hours sped by in a hurry. I'd given him a good washing and patted his face with Old Spice, but he still smelled like death. He hadn't stirred a bit. If it wasn't for his loud breathing, I would have thought he'd already gone on and passed away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. And, it's always nice when we hear something that maybe hasn't come out yet or we don't know it. And so it's always a treat to get that at Kentucky Great Writers. So thank you for that. Thank you also, too, for sharing your story about Alice Spielberg and finding an agent at the Carnegie Center. We are going to be having Alice actually this Saturday doing some agent consultations through the Carnegie Center. So who knows, maybe somebody listening tonight will sign up and they'll get their chance to maybe find an agent through Alice. She's wonderful. So, well,
Yes.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, and next up we have Wesley Browne, and this is Wesley Browne with an E. Hi, Wes, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jennifer?
Doing pretty good. So where are you located today?
I'm in Richmond, right across, just barely across the river into Madison County.
All right, well, good. We're so glad you could join us tonight. And I'm going to tell our audience a little bit about Wesley Browne with an E. Wesley is no stranger to literary series as he hosts the Pages and Pints reading series out of Apollo Pizza in Richmond. And he's also a lawyer and manages restaurants and a music venue when he's not writing. And I don't know how you have time for writing with all this other stuff. And I know you have family that you also do things with as well. His debut, Hillbilly Hustle, burst onto the literary scene last year to a mountain of praise. And there's even a country boy brewing lager named in the book's honor, which is pretty cool. Suicide Woods author Benjamin Percy says, Wesley Browne writes like the smart talking, card shuffling, bullet dodging, bourbon soaked love child of Ron Rash, Elmore Leonard, and the Coen brothers. He's clever as hell, a swift plotter with a heart-bruised sense of character and a brilliant ear for dialogue. Now, Silas House also has great things always to say when he gives a blurb, and I love how he says that this novel sheds light on a whole new kind of Appalachia that's never been seen before. So if Silas says that, it's really something to definitely be reading. And, I like also what Robert Gipe, who we're going to hear from later tonight, I like what he says about this book too. He says, Wes Browne dishes up a smart, tasty debut delivered in an assured voice, one that is sure to create a buzz among readers who like their comedy dry and the pace of their tales brisk. And now let's hear from Wesley Browne.
Thank you. And I would point out, I did not find an agent at the Carnegie Center, but I have enjoyed Carnegie Center events in the past and actually attended the Books in Progress conference at one point too. It's been a long time aspiration of mine to be in this series, and I really appreciate y'all having me. Route 421 in Jackson County had more twists in it than 6 months of pro wrestling. Since Knox had been doing business with Burl, he'd come to know everyone. Take any of them too fast, and you could find yourself plunging down a holler praying to miss the big trees. Knox typically went a pretty good clip, but he was cautious. On his way back home, once he got down Big Hill and back into Madison County, the tighter curves were behind him, so he relaxed a bit. He coasted down Big Hill and back into Madison County, tapping his brakes. He rolled past the gas and food mart at the corner of 21, which led to Berea, and stayed north on 421, headed toward the bypass in Richmond. As he passed the trailer on the left that housed the Big Hill post office, he lowered his visor and pulled out a little number he had tucked up there and sparked it. Sleet continued to peck the windshield, growing increasingly solid with each mile. Knox burned the joint and sang along to the radio. The bridge over Hayes Fork was in a straightaway. Knox had the tips of his fingers of his left hand poked out the cracked window, releasing the last bit of that joint to the wind. He was diverted watching the little orange lightning bug bounce on the asphalt in the side view mirror when his rear end drifted and hit the right side of the bridge. His headlights in front of him lit up the railing on the left side. He threw the steering wheel into the slide, and whether it was too hard or it was too late, it was difficult to say. But he spun fast the other way and bashed his front end into the same side of the bridge the rear end had already hit. A blur of sparks showered his hood as his grill ground into the concrete and metal of the bridge. The friction slowed his slide, and when the car cleared the bridge, it rolled down the ditch in front of him. Knox locked the brakes, dug into the wet grass, and the car stopped with a lurch, embedded. After the fury of the crash, the sudden stillness was startling. Knox hurt, but couldn't tell if it was anything bad. Something ticked under the hood that sounded like an egg timer. He looked out, but there was nothing visual other than smoke, ripples in the hood, and a new crack fingering up from the bottom of the windshield. Knox's seatbelt had cinched him until he thought it might cut him in 3 pieces. He managed to get it unlatched. The release of pressure was instantaneous. He slumped forward into the steering wheel. It wasn't until then he realized the airbag had never deployed. His vision was foggy, and he had the sensation that even though he had undone his seatbelt, it was still touching him. When he reached for it to get it off again, it wasn't there. The driver door seemed intact. When Knox tried to handle it, stuck, but creaked open grudgingly. He spilled out the door, slumped on his side, and rolled to his back on the cold, wet loam. Being out of the car felt like having an ice pack laid on his whole battered body, and he was momentarily grateful for it. He lay there, letting the sleet patter his face, repeating, "Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit." Whatever relief he might have felt at being out of the car didn't last past him raising his head to discover his trunk had jarred open. He flipped to his belly, rose to his knees, and gingerly got to his feet. He lurched to the lighted trunk and found a red pizza delivery bag hanging half out and nothing else. Most notably, the chicken of the sea box was gone. Knox had lost his handle on 3 pounds of Burl's pot. He grabbed the trunk and slammed it down, only for it to pop open and hit him in the chin. "God fucking damn it," he bellowed. He did the same again, only harder, and this time laid on the trunk belly first as it closed. Something clicked and it latched. The downside to this was immediately apparent in that the trunk light was the best light he had. He pushed off the trunk and stared stupidly into the dark. Aside from his headlights and red taillights, porch lights and floodlights of nearby houses were all he could see through the murky dark and trees. The storm clouds blunted whatever the moon and stars might have thrown. Nothing from the homes gave him any useful illumination. Whatever chemicals Knox's body had released, along with those from the joint he just smoked, left him numb and slow-witted. When he finally remembered he had his phone in his pocket, it was a revelation. He pulled it out, half expecting it not to work, but the screen lit and wasn't cracked any worse than it already had been from him dropping it 100 times before. He tapped the flashlight app and was glad for what little light it gave. He made his way up the ditch back to the bridge over the creek. As he reached level ground, he exhaled at the sight of the box, but his throat tightened again when he saw one of the packages on the asphalt nearby. Once Knox drew closer, he found ashy green buds scattered like spilled popcorn from one of the bundles. Another package hung from the torn box, apparently undamaged. The third was still inside. Just as he bent to pick up the battered box, headlights were on him. The approaching car decelerated, but its beams were blinding. All Knox could do was stand back up and cover his eyes. Once the car was stopped, the hazard lights flashed on and the driver's door opened. A thin man in pale blue jeans with white tennis shoes, a nylon jacket, and a University of Kentucky hat with an enormous logo on it that started on the brim and ended on the crown approached. "Everything all right?" Knox looked the man over, thinking he could either cold cock him or run. Your basic fight or flight urges. He quickly registered that both options were insane. After probably too long of a pause, he said, "I was in a wreck." The man in the gaudy hat squinted. "Anyone hurt?" "No, it's just me. I think I'm okay." The man looked at what was at Knox's feet, so Knox did too. Then they met eyes. The man mashed his lips together and worked them around as if he had some water in his mouth he was thinking about squirting out between his teeth. Unless he was stupid or very sheltered, he knew what lay there. He pointed. "Looks like a whole lot of marijuana in the road." Knox nodded and considered what to say next. Behind him, a woman's voice said, "Everybody okay out here?" A large flashlight beam filtered onto them. "My kids said they heard a car wreck." A woman in her early 30s had a coat on over pajamas, her feet in winter boots, and a phone to her ear. When Knox turned back to the man, a Dodge Ram pickup truck, one of the big ones, came in behind the man's car and gradually stopped. "I've got 911 on the line," the woman said. "They want to know if anyone's hurt." Knox's eyes went back to the woman, to the weed catastrophe, and then again to the man in the UK hat who watched expectantly. Knox pulled a long breath in through his nostrils. "I'm a little beat up, but I think I'll be all right." He looked the man hard in the eyes. "This box was in the road. I lost control trying to miss it. I think my car's totaled." "At least you're okay," the woman said. "Thank God for that." Knox didn't take his eyes from the man, and the man didn't take his from Knox. The cops bought none of it. After checking to be sure Knox wasn't dying on the spot, one of them led him away to the grass near his ruined car for questioning. He was a state trooper and a kid, really, Knox thought, not much older than Rob, but with a short haircut, a big stiff hat, a gray uniform, and a very different conception of civic responsibility. After he had Knox away from everyone else, he commenced the browbeating. "You really think anyone is going to believe that pot isn't yours? You smell like goddamn Snoop Dogg and your car reeks like a grow room." Blue lights and red lights flashed all around. The strobe effect combined with the crash was making Knox dizzy. The paramedics wanted to take him, but the trooper insisted since he was up and around, it was okay to talk a minute. The paramedics seemed kind of pissed. Knox stared at the trooper's silver name tag with the letters etched in it, trying to maintain some kind of equilibrium. "I don't know what to tell you. It's not mine." Knox swayed a little side to side, and the trooper reached out and held his arm until he steadied. "Man, I'm not feeling too good. I think I need to go to the hospital." The trooper glanced at the paramedics standing impatiently at the roadside. He got quieter, like he was telling a secret. "Why don't you just give it up so we don't have to waste all this time? We found a roach in the road back there, and when we run DNA on it, you and me both know what it'll show. You're getting charged with DUI either way. If you'll just tell me the truth now, I'll let you go home after the hospital." He shook his head and squeezed one eye closed, like what he had to say next pained him. "You don't come clean, I'll have to take you to jail after you get released. You really want to go to jail?" More and more, the taste of blood in Knox's mouth came through. He worked his tongue in vain, trying to swallow it down. "It's got to be like that?" "I'm afraid so." "Okay," Knox said, drawing near to the trooper. "I'm going to tell the truth." The trooper's eyes opened wider. "That's not my pot. It belongs to someone else." Knox held up his right palm. "I'd take a polygraph." "Your DNA's on that joint and you know it." "Do you have it?" "Your DNA?" The trooper nodded. "Not yet, but we'll pull it at the hospital and then we'll test it for a match at the lab." "No," Knox said. "I mean the joint." "You bet I do." Knox popped his chin at the road. "Did you pick it up with gloves? Can you really test something for DNA if you don't wear sterile gloves?" "Oh, so now you're in law enforcement?" "No, but I read a lot." The trooper looked at the ground where he was digging a toe into the mud. He took Knox by the arm again, this time much harder, and led him toward the paramedics. "That pot's yours. Everyone here knows it. We'll prove it one way or the other." "Officer," Knox said, shuffling along with him, "I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but if that was true, you wouldn't be trying so hard to get me to say it." He cut his eyes at Knox. "It's trooper. I'm not an officer. I'm a trooper." He didn't utter another word before turning Knox over to the paramedics. The fact of the matter was, Knox was scared shitless, and the whole thing was a fucking disaster. He almost wanted to laugh at the young cop. He was the least of Knox's troubles. He didn't scare him, and neither did the judge he would face over the DUI, nor that all he had was liability insurance on the old Volvo. The only thing that frightened Knox at that moment was the 3 pounds of lost pot and who it belonged to.
Thanks, Wesley. Definitely some tense moments in that reading. I bet the whole book is like that. throughout just tense moments. You know that something bad's about to happen and you just can't stop it. It's coming.
I hope so. So I've been told.
Yeah, well,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much. Next, we have Robert Gipe joining us.
Hello.
Hey, Rob, where are you coming from today?
I'm in Harlan, Kentucky.
Harlan. So we've got people from up north today, people from south, people from central Kentucky. And it's great to have everybody here from all over, all reading for Kentucky Great Writers. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to tell the audience just a little bit about you. I think some of you all have probably, based on the names I saw, have seen Rob at one of our other Kentucky Great Writers readings. And so this is going to sound a little familiar because this is part of a trilogy. Pop is part of a trilogy. But by day, Rob Gipe, I don't know if you all know this, he produces and or coordinates community-based arts programs and festivals in Appalachia. And currently the Higher Ground Community Performance Series in Harlan is where you could find him. He received the 2021 Judy Gaines Young Book Award, among other awards, for the illustrated novels in this trilogy. And the trilogy ends with Pop, which may or may not be what he's reading from tonight. Publishers Weekly calls Pop an addictive novel, saying comedy and tragedy make way for unexpected uplift in this richly detailed story of people determined not to be forgotten. And it's not only a great story, but it's also masterfully told. Author Leah Hampton says, Rob is the writer's writer of Appalachia, our soothsayer and sage. His work has busted our storytelling wide open, and his legacy will be a long one. And she points out his gut punch dialogue, beautiful prose, unique illustrations, and a hard reckoning with ourselves and our neighbors. Only Gipe can show us wounds like this. Now, Wesley Browne, who we just heard from, also had some great things to say. And he says, Robert Gipe is Appalachia's Willy Wonka. Pop is your golden ticket. It'll crack your smile, break your heart, and rouse your soul, all in the space of a page. So let's find out for ourselves. I give you Robert Gipe.
Thank you, Jennifer. I've been looking forward to being with you fellers all day. It's been everything I hoped it would be. Thanks for those readings, Angela and Wes. And really, I'd like for my nickname to be Honey Bun. If anybody wanted to call me Honey Bun, that'd be cool. But of course, you can't pick your own nickname. I'm going to read a couple chapters out of Pop. The first one, the speaker is named Nicolette. I'd worked this Episcopal woman's catering job down in town, so I had a little money. I went over to Uncle Filbert's car lot and got the keys to a wrecked Kia still run and drove it off the mountain down to Kennard. I went into the Feedmore beside the hardware store and got Mom bologna and light bread, the yellow dog pop she wanted, some Grippo's potato chips, 2 boxes off-brand Pop-Tarts, 7 cans of off-brand Beanie Weenies, 5 cans of Vienna sausage, and I brought it back and set it on Granny's patio. I spent the rest of the day sitting on a rock above Hubert's cabins, watching him boss around the boys, hung around waiting for him to tell them what to do. They swept and they fixed, they beat rugs and mopped, stuff they'd have never done if it wasn't Hubert telling them to do it. Or maybe they did it because they thought they might get to meet a movie star. I don't know. I don't like to spend too much time in the heads of Hubert's boys. I was aggravated at Hubert for not getting after little Colbert and wished I wasn't. Hubert had showed me how to clean fish, how to make soup, beans, and cornbread, and let me come with him to a hog killing. After my great papa Houston died, Hubert sang the old songs with me, Quilliquay and Wish I Was a Mole in the Ground, the ones me and Houston used to sit in the high-rise apartments in downtown Kennard and sing. It was near dark when the wind picked up, bit me through my hoodie, reminded me I need to get my big coat out of Hubert's place. I love my big blue overcoat. I found it in my grandma Dot's attic in the house where Daddy grew up. That coat made me look like I was in the Navy or the Matrix. In the pocket of that coat was a stack of index cards tied with a ponytail holder. Cards had written on them recipes from Hubert's mother, my great-grandmother, stack cake, apple butter, chess pie, how to fix poke so it wouldn't kill you, stuff her mother told her when she first set up housekeeping. I love them cards. They were large stained and written in a young girl's loopy hand back when they taught handwriting in school. I hustled back to Hubert's through the rattling trees. I peeped in Hubert's picture window and the lights were all on. I seen my coat on the rocking chair. Little Colbert was asleep on the couch. I come around the back of the house, come in through the kitchen, got my coat off the rocker and my belt off the floor, come back out on the porch. Little Colbert never stirred, and it was getting cold again, cold as whiz. The moon was round and white, like a hole been punched in the night, and the next day she was shining through like a heel in a ruined sock. I stood on the porch with my hands in my pockets and my mind on my mom. She'd lost a lot of people over the years, and it had knocked the wind out of her. I don't guess she'd mind me telling you, but she'd been in jail a little while. Now she just stayed at Mama Cora's, puffed up like a big dead dog, couldn't stop eating, drank a case of pop a day, barely got out of bed. I wished I could do for her. I felt in my coat for the recipe cards, but they weren't there. I looked in the window. Little Colbert had got up and moved to the back room, packing his things. I snuck back in Hubert's to hunt for my cards, scared little Colbert would hear me. He didn't, but I never found my cards. I wish them cards was in my hand so hard, about cracked my skull wishing it. I walked out to Hubert's cabins to hunt them cards and a place to sleep. And so that's the end of that chapter. And then this chapter is narrated by Nicolette, who was just talking her mom, whose name is Dawn. My Granny Cora's house is 300 yards past Hubert's cabins. Sits up on a knob, a thick green lawn she kept tidy, flowery bushes all in the yard. Pots of herbs lined up on the house side of a concrete carport. I should have just walked over to the cabins to see if Nicolette was with Hubert, but I didn't. I was having issues. I can say that now. I was too much on the internet, and the way it made the world seem horrible made me feel horrible. I couldn't hardly leave the house. It's embarrassing to admit. I called Hubert on his cell phone. I said, did little Colbert hurt Nicolette? And Hubert said, I reckon little Colbert is leaving us. This didn't make no sense to me. Little Colbert loved swinging his big cock stick better than anybody I'd ever seen. I said, bullshit he is. And Hubert said, don't believe me, hide and watch. I said, what happened? Hubert said, he said one too many sacks of poop in my lap. I said, where's Nicolette? And Hubert said, speak of the devil. And I said, what? And he said, she just walked in the door. I said, let me talk to her. I heard him say to her, talk to your mommy. And then Hubert said to me, she says she can't. I said, put Nicolette on the damn phone. And Nicolette said, hello. I said, you tell me what happened. You tell me right now. She said, somebody got my cards. I said, what cards? She said, my recipe cards I got from Granny Jewel. I said, that's what you was upset about. She said, I love those cards. And I said, I know you did, baby. I'm sorry. And she sniffed a little. I said, did you get my groceries? She said, yeah, I put them on the patio. I said, well, hope a bear ain't got them. She said, they're hibernating. I said, your cousins ain't. She said, I love you, Mama. I said, you coming back over here? And she said, not tonight. I said, well, keep your phone on. And I said, and she said, I will. And I said, I love you too, baby. You know that. And she said, yeah. And she hung up, and I sat there on the couch in my house shoes and pajama bottoms watching little videos of dogs jumping on the trampoline and men hollering in front of American flags about how the Democrats are going to take away their AKs and make it impossible to buy bullets. I watched this man in Big Stony talk mush right on this woman's Facebook wall while his wife was doing live commentary on it on her wall. There was also two blockheads, one in Buzztop and one had moved to Lexington, arguing about who would win a fight between God and Superman. I had my leg thrown over the arm of an easy chair, eating microwave popcorn and drinking them pops Nicolette brought me until I finally just slouched out on the floor and fell into a deep and pitiful sleep. That's it.
Well, Rob, this is just for you. Thanks, honey bun.
No problem. No problem.
In all seriousness, though, thank you to Robert Gipe, to Wesley Browne, and to Angela Jackson Browne for their readings tonight. They've been thoroughly enjoyable. And, one of the things I love about these was that, they're about characters who feel like real people. They're people with vices, they're people with problems, and, also relationships that just aren't perfect, but yet this is the world we live in. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we are going to be doing a question and answer session with our authors. If you haven't yet, we do have a a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. You're welcome to put your questions in there. And I'm going to have all three of our authors come back with their cameras on and their mics on. And I'm going to start by asking a question that is for all three of you to answer. I'm a detail person, and I work really hard in my own writing to put those little details in. And I noticed that with all three of you, that, you all also have really put some, fine-tuned details in, whether it's portraying a place, people who live in a region, or even a time frame in which a story happens. And so I wondered if you could share some of the details that you have painstakingly fine-tuned for your own novels. And for example, I know, Wes, you had a ton of Kentucky references in your story. So maybe that was something you intentionally put a lot of work into. But if you all could just speak a little bit about the details that are the most important to you when you're drafting.
You mentioned the Kentucky details, so I'll start an answer. I'm pretty obsessive about the details. I hate for anyone to say, "Oh, he got this or that wrong," and I will admit to being one of those difficult people who, when I find wrong details in a book, it bugs me. And I'm a lawyer by trade, so there's a certain amount of wanting things to be accurate. And I made a decision to make most of the details about Central Kentucky and little aspects of Eastern Kentucky true to life. Most of the businesses that are mentioned in Hillbilly Hustle, except the pizza shop, I actually changed the name of the pizza shop because my family are co-owners of Apollo Pizza, and I changed that to Porthos Pizza because it involves a pizza shop selling pot, which in fact, Apollo Pizza, you did used to be able to buy pot there before we owned it, but I didn't want to perpetuate that. But I like things to be correct. And in particular in Hillbilly Hustle, there's a recurring storyline about the main character, Knox Thompson, and his girlfriend enjoy My So-Called Life. And I talk about the box sets, and I spent a lot of time on the internet getting the colors and the sizes and what episodes were in which VHS box sets and when they came out, right? Because I didn't want a My So-Called Life fan to say, "No, you talked about My So-Called Life and you got it wrong." So I really obsess over the details, I will admit it, and I try hard to get them right.
Yeah, I agree with Wesley. I write a lot of historical fiction, so I'm by default I have to get the details right, because just like Wesley said, there's going to be someone out there who will know about the subject matter that I'm writing about, and even though we're calling our work fiction, there's an expectation that the details that are supposed to be factual, that we do get them right. So for example, I'm very big on locations in my stories, and I actually like to go to the locations when possible. So when I was younger, we used to frequently drive through Slap Out, Alabama. And there was no reason to drive through it except you were going to another place. So I don't ever remember anyone who intentionally said, "Why don't we take a road trip to Slap Out?" You were always going through it to get somewhere else. And so from a time as a young writer, I always thought, I want to write a story that involves Slap Out. And so these characters basically found me and said, "Hey, we're from Slap Out, write about us."
What about you, Rob?
Saying that about you're always on your way to somewhere else when you're going to Slap Out. Harlan, we're like, a guy told me one time, he was a delivery man. He said, "Harlan's the place where the truck turns around, that it's not on the way to anywhere." That a truck comes to Harlan, it's got to turn around and go back where it came from. But I don't know. I'm sure I took a workshop at the Carnegie Center or elsewhere, and they told me to put a lot of details in. I think that for me, one is usually your details are in two categories. One is just like to make people see a specific place and not be too generic. And then the other one is a lot of times when you're kind of thinking about your larger themes, you know, and you have a choice, you choose some detail that without, you know, naming the theme kind of helps you illuminate your themes or just reinforce them. So I apologize. I won't go third next time. It gives you more time to think about what you say, all that stuff about categories. But it's not really that figured out. But I don't know. Is that helpful?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's really neat how, you know, you could take a story that anybody could tell, but when you put the details into it, suddenly it becomes your story. And, you know, there's so many, you know, archetypal characters, there's so many, you know, storylines that you see throughout books, but it's those details that make them unique and really make them vivid.
Can I share a Kentucky specific detail that I want to put to bed once and for all, because I've seen it in multiple books?
Yes.
There's only one basketball division in Kentucky. There's no AA, AAA, and that sort of thing like other sports. And I've seen 2 books and have heard works in progress where they're driving through a town where it says AAA state basketball champions, and that doesn't exist in Kentucky. There's one division. And I know it's a silly thing, but it's very Kentucky centric. And I have seen that repeated over and over again. And I don't know why, but it's one that I always catch. Well, I know why, because I pay attention, but I always catch that one and say, that doesn't work that way.
And I wanted to add too, I don't know about Robert and Wesley, but because all my literature, what I write is Southern fiction, and Southern characters are like Southern folks. They love talking. And it's very easy for me to get wound up in dialogue. So oftentimes the details that you see in my work, those don't come initially. I just have chapters full of people talking to each other, and they forget about where they are and what they're doing while they're there. So it really is a layering on process for me, because I love characters. I love how they sound. I love the cadence of their voices. So I really have to think about setting, and I have to think about, you know, all those other rich details that make a story what it is. Because, you know, that's where I could just sit all day long, is listening to folks talk.
And Angela, you've actually touched on something I was going to ask for my next question, because I was going to ask you 3, what comes first? Is it the character that you're going to write about, or is it the story and the plot about what happens to the character?
I always kind of talk character first, you know, that you get somebody you want to talk about, or somebody carry the story, and then you flush them out as far as you can, and then you just start putting them in situations. I say this a lot. Some of y'all, I see some people I've had in class, but that was when I understood what situation comedy is. You know, that if you've got a character like Barney Fife, and that everybody, or that a lot of people understand what that character is all about, and then you just put them in a situation, and a lot of times you can just say the name and the situation and people start laughing, because it's just inherently, it's a situation comedy, right? And so characters first for me.
And Rob, you've got a unique book, because it's an illustrated novel. So for you, is it the actual writing of the character, or is it the drawing of the character that comes first to you?
Well, you can't be a narrator in my books until I can figure out how to draw you over and over. And so that's the only rules there. Like, I'm a real limited drawer. So there are a lot of characters I couldn't figure out what they look like, so they don't get to be narrators. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but
It does. It does. So Wes and Angela, what about you? Character or plot?
I think it depends. Like for my novels and short stories, it's generally the characters that I hear from first. But I also write plays. And for some reason with the plays, it's generally the plot that I come up with first, because I think of it, and I even think about my writing now, my fiction in the same kind of 3-act structure, so I can sit down and plot out a novel using that same format that I use when I'm writing a play, which has really helped me a lot as far as, seeing how, various plot points connect to other plot points. So it kind of depends on what I'm writing, which comes first. But for fiction, it's usually the characters. But for a play, I generally just, a story will come to me and I'll find people to put in there.
Angela said something really similar to how I look at things too earlier. If I'm stuck, I just write dialogue between characters and figure it out later. That's that. I don't really get blocked very much because I love writing dialogue. When I'm in my car, I will sort of talk to myself and it's dialogue that I'm thinking about. So, so that's by its very nature, that's character. I also grew up, one of my favorites growing up was Elmore Leonard, and Elmore Leonard wasn't really big on plotting. He said you push your characters out the door and see where they go. And I'm someone who feels like until I know my characters, I can't say what they would do. I get to know them as I write them. And then that's how I know where they're going to go and what they're going to do and what trouble they get into. And you touched on it earlier, but my writing style is I like to make their problems worse and worse and worse. And so it comes to me as I go. I have something bad happen to them. And I think, what other bad thing could happen for them? And I just pile it on until it reaches a crescendo and then, see where it goes. But to make that interesting, you have to have good characters. And the last thing I'll say in particular is this book was started at the Appalachian Writers Workshop in a class with Amy Green. And the exercise where I got my protagonist was, she said, just sit down and write 50 characteristics of a protagonist you want to write about. And so this book literally was develop a character and then figure the book out later. So I'm pretty pure character person.
And you all also mentioned some things that are with this last question I'm going to ask. So each of you addresses difficult issues in your novels, whether that is, drugs in Appalachia, or it is, racism, or it's something else. And so as you were writing your story, and I know that characters a lot of times for most of you come first, were you thinking that I want these characters to encounter these difficult issues, or did those issues just kind of develop as the story progressed for you as you were writing your first draft or subsequent drafts?
Well, as I mentioned, I typically write historical fiction. So my novel, When Stars Rain Down, is set in 1936 in rural Georgia. So just by virtue of the time frame and where they lived, race and racism was going to be a part of the conversation. Class was going to be a part of the conversation. So there are a lot of things that just whenever I set the story, that kind of dictates what's happening. I have a subscription to newspapers.com. If you are a writer and you write historical works, that's a great resource. You can probably even get it through the public library, because I'm always looking to see what was happening in the news when my story was taking place. And I will blend in real life issues with what's happening in the lives of my characters.
That how Satchel Paige got in there.
That's how Satchel Paige got in there. Plus, my daddy was a big fan of the Negro League baseball. So that was an homage to him as well.
Nice.
Robert, you talk now.
My mom saw Satchel Paige pitch for the Indians, for the Cleveland Guardians now. But so we always heard about. That was cool. And Mrs. Page as well makes the scene. I forgot what Jennifer asked us.
That's okay.
I had a question for Angela. Could I ask it? So I told everybody I wasn't gonna write any more books, and then but I started working on something that's said a long time ago. And so I have a question about the writing of historical fiction, which I've never. How do you know when to quit researching and start writing? And also, yeah, that, because you can research. I've bought so many books. Someone needs to come cut me off. I see Mandy Sheffel is in that. She's the bookstore that I've named on bookshop.org. So she probably is like, hopes I'll write a lot of historical novels. But anyway, what do you say, Angela? How do you know when to stop researching?
Well, I do my research in stages. So the first stage is, okay, so I know the book is going to, like my upcoming novel next year is going to be set during 1948, during the presidential elections between the Dixiecrats and Truman. So I like politics, but I didn't know a lot about that time. So I felt like I need to spend some time reading about the history. So I did probably about a good 3 months of just reading historical accounts of what went on during that time. Then when I get to the writing, before I start writing in the evening, I make a grocery list of what I need to know to write my chapters the next day. And when I get up the next day, I set a timer, and then I will take however much time I allocate, whether it's an hour or 2 hours to researching, then that's what I'm going to use. And so I'm forced to not get myself down a rabbit hole, because you can start off researching the Negro League, and the next thing you know, you're looking at the mating habits of fruit flies, and you're like, how did I get there? Because one thing leads to another, and most of us are curious people. We love information. So I just have to learn to put barriers in place to keep myself from going over the rabbit hole of too much information.
That's good. I love that list. Yeah, because I'll be like, did they have shoestrings then? And then 5 hours later, yeah, bought a bunch of shoes.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, those egg timers are wonderful because they make a loud noise, and oh my goodness, I got to stop and start writing now.
Yeah.
So Wes, excuse me. So Wes, the answer or your answer to the question, what comes first? Is it the issue? Is it something that develops over time?
I try not to be too heavy-handed, and I try to let the issues come to me and develop as I'm writing. My book came from West Virginia University Press, which, by the way, had a really big year in 2020. If people aren't aware, that was a great year for a university press. And my book was way down the chain from Disha Philyaw, who did everything in the world last year and is still going strong. But anyway, we have peer reviewers. And so you have two writers who are perhaps more experienced than you who look your book over. And one of the things, because there was a lot of law enforcement on my book, is I wanted to touch on the disparate treatment of people of different races by law enforcement. But I also wanted people who needed to understand it to not put the book down. So I tried to make sure that I came at it in sort of a subtle way. And I had one of my characters say something that was sort of misguided intentionally. And one of my peer reviewers sort of recoiled at that. And when I realized that he said, well, that's not right, and that sort of thing. And I said, I'm just going to take it out in that way, because I don't want anyone to think I'm espousing this view. I thought it was clear that this person was misguided in what their thoughts were, but it didn't come across, and I took it out. But I found that there have been a lot of folks who maybe weren't receptive to talking about that issue, who've really liked the book, and I just hope that permeated them when they finished it. Some of the things that are touched on in there, but I my book is sort of a page turner. I jokingly say it's an airport read that didn't sell in airports, so that kind of hurt it. But I don't want to get too far into issues necessarily. And I also am not sure I'm the right person to do it. I'm not the, I'm okay with social issues, but I think there's much more eloquent and deeper thinking people who could probably inform some of those issues better than I can. So I just want to do my part that I'm capable of doing and leave it at that.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for your answers to these questions. I love too that, Rob, you had a good question that for Angela. And Angela, we might have to have you at the Carnegie Center teaching on how to research a historical book. I mean, some great answers. Thank you for sharing that.
You know when you want me there.
Absolutely. I'll
That's
have
good. I
somebody
was just getting ready
contact
to
you.
apologize.
I know,
Angela.
let us
Sorry
know
I
when
got you
she's
into that.
let me know when she's coming. I'd like to meet Angela in person. Has been very
Oh, I'd like to meet all of you. Zoom is fine, but this is not the same as being, elbow to elbow on a stage.
no man.
Exactly.
It is not.
Exactly. I know one of the things about Kentucky's literary community that I love, and Crystal Wilkinson had mentioned this in a recent Smiley Pete article, is that, people hug each other. They support each other in the Kentucky literary community. And that's one of the things that I think during the pandemic, you get to see each other on Zoom, but it's not the same as seeing each other in person at all, because there's a bunch of huggers, there's a bunch of people who love to talk to each other and to cheer each other on. So even though you can't hear the audience cheering for you tonight, we are all clapping for you for these wonderful readings, for these wonderful answers. And, as we're wrapping up, I'm going to have a parting question that I want to ask each of you. So where can people go to find out more about your writing?
For me, the easiest thing is for them to go to my website, www.angelajacksonbrowne.com.
Okay, great.
I'm at Wesley Browne with an E.com. And I have my book has a Facebook page, and I don't love Facebook, but it's out there and I use it. And if you want to see the events I'm going to be a part of, I update Facebook a little bit better than my website because it's slightly easier. But anyway, those are the places you can find me. And on Twitter, at Browne all over, also with an E.
I just generally tell people to call Wes. I'll put his cell phone in the chat. He's been with me the whole way. But also I have a website, robertgipe.com, and I put this event on it today, so it's up to date. Yeah.
I love it. Well, for our audience at home, I hope you'll go to the bookshop link that you have found in the Carnegie Center's chat window and definitely buy these books. We will be keeping those books on the Carnegie Center's bookshop page there. Or if you don't buy them from the bookshop page, buy them somewhere. Support your Kentucky authors and these wonderful, wonderful books. Thanks all of you for joining us. Thank you again so much to our wonderful authors. I've really enjoyed talking with all of you and hearing about your books. So to everyone who's watching, I hope you have a good night. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night, y'all. Nice being
Good luck.
Good
Good luck
night.
in Muncie. Good luck in Richmond. Bye,
Good-
y'all.
Y'all too.
Bye.